We first experienced essentially a shipment of some walnut material from Northern California.
Let's see which one. We need to get closer here.
Hello?
I don't think that one's on. I think our battery's out on that one. Let me give you the hand mic.
Okay.
Do it the old-fashioned way.
Okay. In Pennsylvania, we first were notified in 2010, 2011 of a shipment of plant material from Northern California. And we had seen some black walnuts with some dieback and mortality in Bucks County near the community of Plumstead. And we went ahead and looked at these trees and we found walnut twig beetle associated with them. Some wood samples were taken. Geosmithia was found with the plant material. I'm just going to run through some of these slides. These are this is a talk that was put together with Dana Rhodes of the Department of Agriculture in Pennsylvania, and I'm with the Bureau of Forestry as a forest pathologist. So at any rate, we did a trace backwards from where this woodworker was turning bowls on some walnut that was California walnut had been shipped to Pennsylvania in Bucks County. And so that's how we're kind of tracking these things, is we're seeing what's coming from where and going to places where there's walnut being cut and concentrated. And so these are areas where we routinely trap outside of the quarantine area. Inside the quarantine area, we trapped for walnut twig beetles for several years, working with Steve Seibold and pheromone materials. And so, am I going? There we go. This is an example of some of branch material with cankers in it. It's once you start seeing cankers, you can isolate from that. And so we coordinated with Dr. Kim, with a plant pathologist in agriculture, and so he was interested in getting samples and tracking them. So the few places that we've had this thing, we've been able to document the presence of walnut twig beetle in the area and Geosmithia. So we have a number of different agencies that are involved with this. I've been primarily working inside the quarantine area along with some technicians to do trapping and to take samples. And we've seen situations where this is not working like I was hoping it would, where we obviously have some tree dieback. We've seen some tree mortality. The hot areas, anything that was in a quarantine area that was documented to have walnut twig beetle or Geosmithia, materials would be sawn up, chipped, burned, whatever. But interestingly, we have two locations that process black walnut into really high value tables. And one is an Oriental fellow who, following World War II, set up in Pennsylvania, Nagasushi, and his walnut materials are showing up in museums all around the northern hemisphere of the planet. And some of these artworks are actually, it's furniture, and they have many $1,000s worth of value. So when we talk about value, some of these materials are sought after. So we set up a trapping at two locations. One was Bucks County Hardwoods. That's where the initial event was observed. And working with Steve Seibold, we were getting, using pheromone materials that he provided, we were getting some beetle numbers in some of our traps of anywhere from 500 to a couple of thousand. This is in the early years, 2011, 2012, 2013 for trapping. Not much has changed since 2014 in Bucks County. We're pretty much at a point where we're not picking up the walnut twig beetle inside the quarantine zones. The Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is that not there? Now that's showing up. Go back one.
You might want to just try using the
Okay,
keyboard
use.
and just it'll come back up.
Okay, so this is Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's one of the wealthier counties in Pennsylvania, and it's highly politicized because of the wealth. But the red stars were areas where we had walnut twig beetle, and the blue stars were areas where we had traps and we've had no walnut twig beetle detected. And these are all within probably about a 3.5 mile area of each other. This is a national map that was generated in 2013, and 2014 we picked up another county, Chester County. Again, it was a documented import of walnut material that had bark material on it that was at a woodworker's shop, and so we've set up traps and monitored at those for walnut twig beetle at those sites. And so from the standpoint of this thing showing up in Pennsylvania, we think it's come through the movement of material, obviously. So we've set up a typical quarantine in the counties affected, and then we have extensive trapping going on in areas where walnut is being cut and accumulated, and so we feel that if there's walnut twig beetle in these locations, this is material that still has its bark on, and so we should be picking up walnut twig beetle. And so far in 2015 and 2016, we've not picked up walnut twig beetle to any numbers. I think the total number in 2015 was like 8 beetles total. So as described earlier, square-edged kiln-dried lumber, furniture that's been finished with no bark, and nuts, nut meats, and shells are not regulated. So I think we've got a pretty good network, and the entomologist that heads up this with the Department of Agriculture is a bark beetle freak. So he's not only interested in walnut twig beetles, but any other kind of bark beetle that comes through. So we're very fortunate to have him present. So the compliance agreements are in place, and people are cooperating. The walnut buyers and that, they're paying very close attention to what we're doing and what we require, and they're cooperating extensively. Where we're at now is we have, if we show up with something, we know how to get rid of that material, to burn it or chip it and burn it or compost it, whatever. So we've got air quality issues when you burn stuff, so we had to go through a bunch of protocols to institute burning of infested material. But the initial site in Bucks County had accumulated a huge amount of buttress stump material or whatever, and we were picking up huge numbers of walnut twig beetles from ground zero and within 50 yards, 100 yards of ground zero. And since that material has been completely chipped and gotten rid of, we're not showing up with any walnut twig beetle. So that's very fortunate for us. Again, 2015, a total of 7 walnut twig beetles were found, and those were from within the quarantine zone. And since then, we're not seeing anything. So where we're at now in the quarantine zone is we're looking at visual surveys, looking for walnut that are showing dieback and or mortality. And I might add that since 2012, Pennsylvania, at least in the eastern half of the state, has been wetter than normal, considerably wetter than normal. And so we're just not seeing the drought stress that is required, I think, to really start picking up on this thing. With that, I guess I can take any questions. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We cooperate with Maryland on running samples through our Department of Agriculture for IDs, and so far we're pretty clean with regards to the walnut twig beetle. Jennifer.
I'm gonna grab that from you.
Yeah, Jenny, go ahead, and I'll just repeat your question.
It's actually not a question. Matt Genzel and I worked in Bucks County Hardwood last year in New Hope, and in October we actually did emerge about 4 walnut twig beetles from New Hope.
Oh, okay.
Residential property, we felled the trees and our beetles. And at Bucks County Hardwood, we did out of one tree we were 4. So the beetles are still there, but obviously very low numbers. I just thought you might want to do that.
Well, what's interesting about the New Hope area is we've had some major storms come through, so there's a lot of walnut that's actually down in these areas. So, you know, the rationale for following this thing is important, but there's a lot of natural stuff going on that could contribute to this thing remaining on site. Yes?
Did it kill the trees that you destroyed, or were you just doing it as a preventative measure, removing trees?
Yes, some trees were killed.
I'm going to repeat the question real
Okay.
quick, Tom. Sorry. So Megan asked if it had killed the trees or if this was a preventative removal of the trees.
Yes, some of the trees were killed, but for the most part, if there was walnut twig beetle infestation at the time, that material was disposed of. And then since then, we've been monitoring, and you know, we haven't had any major disposal activity since that 2011-2012 initial event.
One more question back here, and let me come back with the microphones.
Just wondered if you could clarify.
Wait a minute. We're recording, Gail, I'm sorry.
I wondered, can you clarify the type of plant material that came from California that you said you first were notified of a shipment of plant material?
Yeah, it was essentially walnut boards with bark attached, and I can't tell you what the sizes were, but from the standpoint of the trace forwards, that was the type of material. Now, once it was established in Plumstead, that may have taken a year or so.
That's my question. If it came in 2000, or you found it in 2010, 2011, but then you started finding all these dead trees?
Well, we haven't found a lot of dead trees. There were a few dead trees at the initial site. And then the fellow at Bucks County Hardwoods is an arborist, and he also processes walnut for tables and that sort of thing. So he was actually finding suspect stuff, and then we followed up at his property and some adjacent properties. The Nagashugi Hardwoods operation, now they have curing barns and that sort of thing, and we've had traps there since 2011, and we never picked up a beetle from that particular location. That's just south of New Hope, which is near the Washington crossing the Delaware routine. So,
All right, thanks, Tom.